That piece of junk is a perfect fit for you. Those words cut through me like a knife when my son-in-law sneered at my late husband's final gift to me, a dilapidated gas station on the outskirts of Chicago. But when I discovered the bronze key hidden inside a wooden angel and unlocked the secret door beneath the station floor, I unearthed a truth that would shatter his world completely. I'm grateful you're here with me now. Please stay until the very end, and let me know what city you're reading my story from. I want to understand just how far this tale has traveled. The cramped room behind the church felt suffocating. The scent of age would hung heavy in the air, and the stuffiness made each breath a struggle. I selected a chair tucked away in the corner, attempting to make myself invisible, as if I could somehow escape the judgmental stares that bore into me from every direction. My daughter Sarah sat at the head of the long table, beside her husband Michael. Little Lily, my 9-year-old granddaughter, pressed herself against her mother's side, her wide eyes filled with confusion and uncertainty. I had always known that Michael harbored a certain disdain for me. He maintained a veneer of politeness, but beneath every carefully chosen word and sidelong glance, I could feel his contempt radiating like cold waves. Mr. Thompson, the family attorney, opened his leather folder and began reading in a monotonous drone, reciting each line of the will that David had left behind. Sarah received a modest savings account, enough to sustain her for a few years as she managed it with care. I watched as Michael clenched his fists, his lips pressing into a thin, hard line. His displeasure was palpable. He had clearly anticipated something more substantial, perhaps a house, a piece of valuable land, or at the very least, something worth considerably more than that small sum. Sarah lowered her head without speaking, gently placing her hand on Lily's shoulder, as if trying to offer comfort to the child, or perhaps to herself. Then Mr. Thompson's gaze shifted toward me. "Mrs. Emily," he said deliberately, "according to Mr. David's will, you are to inherit the Star gas station." Silence descended upon the room like a heavy blanket. I felt every pair of eyes lock onto me, but I refused to look up. The Star gas station. That name carried with it a flood of memories. It was where David had begun his working life, where he had poured his sweat, his heart, and his dreams from the time he was a young man full of ambition. But now, it was nothing more than a collection of rusted metal and broken dreams, abandoned on the desolate outskirts of Chicago. Nobody stopped there anymore. Nobody even glanced at it as they drove past. I knew this painful truth, and clearly, everyone else in that room knew it too. Suddenly, harsh laughter shattered the tense silence. Michael slammed his hand down on the table and fixed me with a mocking grin that made my stomach turn. "That piece of junk is a perfect fit for you," he repeated, his voice dripping with scorn. "I thought Sarah's inheritance was pathetic, but it turns out yours is even worse." Several relatives chuckled under their breath. Others simply shook their heads, as if I were some kind of cruel joke. They whispered amongst themselves, but I heard every single word as clearly as if they were shouting directly at me. Each sentence felt like a blade piercing my heart. Did Emily really think they'd leave her anything important? I never liked her from the moment she joined this family. Every comment was a blow to my chest. I had always known they never truly accepted me. From the very first day I entered David's family, a poor girl from a small town in Illinois, they had looked down on me with barely concealed disdain. "She's not on our level," they would say behind closed doors. "She just got lucky catching David." But I had never cared about wealth or social status. I loved David, and he loved me deeply in return. Together we built a family. We had Sarah. We lived a simple life, but it overflowed with love and warmth. And now, with him gone, here I sat, alone, surrounded by whispers that contained not even a shred of compassion or understanding. Sarah looked at me with tear-filled eyes, but said nothing. I knew she was torn inside, wanting desperately to defend me, but not daring to speak up in front of Michael. She had always been like that, afraid of displeasing him, afraid of the relatives' criticism, afraid of making an already difficult situation worse. I didn't blame Sarah. I only felt a deep, aching sadness. Sad for her and sad for myself, both of us trapped by the glares, the cruel words, and the suffocating expectations of others. The reading of the will ended in a heavy, tension-filled atmosphere. Everyone slowly rose from their seats. The murmuring started again, growing louder, but I didn't want to hear anymore. I just wanted to escape that room, to flee from those looks of pity and ridicule. As I walked toward the door, Michael suddenly approached me, a smile plastered across his face, as sweet as it was transparently fake. "Mom, I was just kidding earlier. Don't be so tense," he said, his voice soft but loaded with underlying intent. "I think you should sell the gas station to me. I have a contact who will buy it instantly. Why would you want to keep that worthless pile of junk?" He patted my shoulder as if trying to console me, but I felt the pressure and threat in every touch. I nodded slightly without meeting his eyes. "I'll think about it," I answered, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael smiled, a smile that sent chills down my spine, and turned away, leaving me standing there alone in the middle of the churchyard. I watched him walk away, saw Sarah take Lily's hand and follow her husband obediently, and a crushing wave of loneliness hit me, like a tidal wave crashing against rocks. A few days after the funeral, I decided to visit the Star gas station. I didn't know what I expected to find there. I only knew I needed to do something, anything, to shake off the suffocating feeling of emptiness that haunted my every waking moment. My old car chugged slowly down the dusty road, leading to the outskirts of Chicago, where the gas station stood in isolation among fields of dry, yellow grass. When I pushed open the rusty iron gate, a loud creak echoed through the air like a greeting from forgotten past. The smell of old gasoline, motor oil, and decay hit me immediately, forcing me to pause and catch my breath. I stood there in the middle of the small, dust-covered office, and it felt as if David were still nearby, wiping his hands on a greasy rag with that kind, gentle smile of his that I'd fallen in love with so many years ago. I started cleaning, taking my time with each task. Every sweep of the broom, every piece of trash I picked up felt like a way of touching my precious memories of David. This gas station had been his dream, the place where he had worked tirelessly, fixing every pump with his own hands, chatting with customers in his deep, warm voice that made everyone feel welcome. I still remembered those peaceful afternoons when I would bring him lunch. I would sit on the old wooden chair and listen to him talk about his grand plans, opening another gas station, expanding the business, or simply buying me a new car, so I wouldn't have to drive my unreliable old one. Now, looking at the rusty pumps and shattered windows, I couldn't help but feel a sharp pang of pain in my chest. This place, once filled with laughter, hope, and dreams, was now nothing more than a ruin, a subject of ridicule for everyone, including my own son-in-law. I knelt down to scrub the grimy floor, trying desperately to hold back my tears. But every time Michael's mocking words from the will reading echoed in my mind, my heart ached unbearably. "That piece of junk is a perfect fit for you." The phrase replayed over and over, an open wound that refused to heal. I wondered if David could have ever imagined that his beloved gas station would be scorned and ridiculed like this. Had he left it to me intentionally as some kind of test, or simply because he had nothing else to give? I shook my head firmly, trying to push away the dark thoughts that threatened to overwhelm me. David wasn't like that. He always had a reason for everything he did, even if I didn't always understand it at the time. As I continued cleaning, I heard an engine approaching from the distance. A shiny, expensive truck pulled up in front of the gas station, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. I immediately recognized Michael's vehicle. He stepped out, his suit as impeccable as it had been at the funeral, but his eyes were colder than ever before. Sarah sat in the back seat, holding Lily close. Neither of them looked like they wanted to be there. Michael slapped the side of his truck with his hand, raising his voice as if he wanted everyone within earshot to hear him clearly. "Mom, I'm here." He held up a thick stack of papers with an arrogant smirk that he couldn't quite hide. "Here's the transfer contract for the gas station. I've already secured an excellent price for you. Sign it, and let's get this over with quickly." I stood up straight, wiped my hands on my apron, and tried to keep my voice steady and firm. "I haven't decided yet, Michael. I need more time." My words were soft, but inside I was seething with anger and frustration. Did he really think I was naive enough to sign immediately just because of a few manipulative words? Michael raised his eyebrows in surprise. The fake smile slowly faded from his face, replaced by an annoyance he couldn't quite conceal. "Mom, Nobody comes to this gas station anymore. Why keep it? He took a step closer, lowering his voice to a threatening tone. People only come here to make fun of it. You don't want them to say you're being stubborn and unreasonable, do you? Just leave it to me. Sign and it's done. I shook my head firmly, my eyes locked directly on his. I told you I need time. Michael scowled, clearly unaccustomed to being refused so directly. He walked back to his truck, but before he could get in, I heard Lily's voice, small but remarkably clear, coming from the open window. I really like this place, Grandma. It smells just like Grandpa. That innocent sentence warmed my heart, if only for a brief moment. Michael whipped around, his expression hardening instantly, and abruptly rolled up the window with force. Through the glass, I could hear him scolding Lily harshly, his voice cruel and sharp. Sit still and be quiet. Don't talk nonsense. The engine roared to life, and he sped off in a massive cloud of dust, leaving me standing there with a heavy heart weighing down my chest. I returned to my cleaning tasks, tried to focus my mind so I wouldn't dwell on Michael's terrible attitude. But Lily's words kept replaying in my mind on an endless loop. It smells just like Grandpa. She was only 9 years old, yet she sensed what the entire world seemed to have forgotten, that this gas station wasn't just a pile of worthless old metal. It was David's hard work, his life's dedication, an essential part of him. And now it was a part of me, too. I took a cleaning rag and continued wiping the dust off the old counter, where David used to sit and meticulously do the accounting books. Every time I touched these old, familiar objects, I felt his presence there beside me, smiling, reassuring me that everything would somehow be okay. Then, as I carefully opened an old wooden drawer, a small carved wooden angel suddenly tumbled out, rolling across the dusty floor. I startled and quickly picked it up, afraid I might have damaged it. It was tiny but surprisingly heavy, carefully carved with gentle eyes that seemed to look directly into my soul. I ran my hand over its smooth surface and noticed a small crack in the base. Intrigued and curious, I pressed on it gently, and to my complete surprise, the crack split open as if it were specifically designed to do so. My heart began pounding frantically in my chest. My trembling hands almost dropped the delicate figure. Inside the hollow base was an old bronze key, wrapped carefully in a faded piece of cloth, waiting silently as if it had been placed there decades ago for this exact moment. I took the key in my hands, feeling the cold metal pressing against my palm. I looked up slowly, surveying the deserted gas station with new eyes. The afternoon light streamed to the broken windows, illuminating thousands of dust particles floating lazily in the air. Everything appeared calm and peaceful, but a strange, powerful feeling began growing deep inside me. That key wasn't there by accident. David never did anything without a carefully considered reason. He had left me this gas station, and now this mysterious key felt like a message, a crucial clue that I had to uncover for myself. I clutched the key tightly in my fist, caught between overwhelming fear and burning curiosity. Michael could laugh and mock all he wanted. The relatives could continue looking down on me with their superior attitudes. But I knew with absolute certainty that the Star gas station wasn't just a pile of worthless junk. It was David's legacy, and perhaps it was also the key to finding myself again amidst all the devastating loss and pain. I slipped the key carefully into my pocket, making a firm resolution to return the next day to discover what secret it was meant to reveal. The following afternoon, I returned to the Star gas station with my heart filled with unease and anticipation. The bronze key rested in my jacket pocket, feeling cold every time my hand accidentally brushed against it. It was small and old, but it seemed to whisper to me constantly, pushing me forward to discover the secret David had deliberately left behind. The Chicago sky was calmer that particular day. The rain had finally stopped, but persistent chills still ran through my body as I pushed open the station's rusty iron gate. The familiar screech echoed loudly, a stark reminder that this place had been forgotten and abandoned for far too long. I stepped inside cautiously, and dim light filtered through broken windows, illuminating the countless dust motes suspended in the still air. Everything appeared the same as yesterday, yet somehow it felt fundamentally different. Something was waiting for me here. I knew it with absolute certainty. I sat down in the old wooden chair, took out the mysterious key, and placed it carefully on the table. The light highlighted the dull tone of the weathered bronze and the numerous small scratches on its surface, as if it had been clutched tightly in someone's desperate hand for decades. I tried the key methodically in every office drawer, in every rusty lock on the metal storage cabinets. None of them fit properly. I shook my head and laughed bitterly at myself. "Emily, you're imagining things," I muttered aloud, trying to shake off the strange feeling that clung to me like a second skin. Maybe I was expecting too much from what everyone else considers complete trash. I tossed the key back onto the table in frustration and decided to return to cleaning to keep my restless mind occupied. I started to move a heavy metal filing cabinet position in the corner of the room, where David used to keep several old toolboxes. It was significantly heavier than I had anticipated, and as I pushed with all my might, I heard a strange, unexpected sound, not the typical scraping of metal dragging across the floor, but rather a faint, distinct crack. I stopped immediately, got down on my knees, and carefully examined the worn tile floor beneath. In the corner where the cabinet had previously covered it, there was a different kind of crack. It didn't look like it had formed from age or natural wear. It was too straight, too precise and deliberate, as if it had been created intentionally. My heart began pounding wildly. I grabbed a nearby iron bar and carefully pried up the suspicious tile. A piece broke off cleanly, revealing a small round metal cover with an old, intricate lock positioned right in its center. The gut feeling returned, stronger than ever before. I rushed to the table, grabbed the bronze key with trembling hands, and inserted it into the lock with barely contained excitement. It fit perfectly, sliding in smoothly as if it had been specifically made for this exact purpose. I turned the key carefully. A dry, metallic click echoed through the room, kicking up a small cloud of ancient dust. I pulled hard on the metal cover. It was incredibly heavy, but I refused to stop now. Underneath was an old wooden ladder, leading down into a pitch-black space below. A musty, stale smell rose up immediately, as if the place had been completely sealed off from the outside world for decades. I took the flashlight from my bag and aimed its beam down into the darkness. The ladder steps were covered in thick dust and stained with age, but they appeared structurally sturdy enough to support my weight. I desperately wanted to go down, to discover what was waiting for me in that hidden place, but a significant part of me was genuinely scared. What had David hidden down there, and why had he never told me about it? Just as I carefully placed my foot on the very first step, the sudden sound of an engine outside interrupted me abruptly. My heart leaped into my throat. I quickly slammed the cover shut, threw a nearby tarp over to conceal it, and sat down in a chair as casually as possible, pretending to write notes in an old accounting notebook. The gas station door flew open violently, and Michael walked in confidently, holding a bag of expensive coffee and a box of fancy pastries. His smile was as fake and forced as ever, but his eyes were cold and calculating, as if he were carefully sizing everything up, searching for something specific. "Sarah said to bring this to you, Mom," he commented smoothly, placing the bag and box on the table with deliberate care. "By the way, let me remind you of something important. You can be as stubborn as you want, but this gas station simply isn't worth keeping." I nodded politely, trying my absolute best to keep my voice calm and steady. "Thank you, Michael. I'll think about it carefully." But his penetrating gaze never left me for a second. He walked slowly around the room, as if conducting a methodical inspection, looking for something out of place. His eyes lingered for an uncomfortably long time on the corner covered by the tarp, exactly where I had just hidden the cellar door mere moments ago. I felt my heart stop beating entirely. Had he noticed something suspicious? I hurried to speak, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts. "How are Sarah and Lily doing? Is the little one okay?" Michael turned back toward me slowly. The fake smile returned to his face, but it was still obviously loaded with hidden intent and underlying threat. "Sarah's the same as always, worrying constantly about Lily to the point where she's not eating or sleeping properly. And Lily, well, Mom, that girl is always saying the most nonsensical things." He emphasized the word nonsensical deliberately, as if trying to remind me of Lily's innocent words the other day about her grandfather's lingering scent. "Mom, I'm being completely serious. Don't let this gas station continue making you suffer unnecessarily. Sell it to me. Let me handle everything. I only want what's genuinely best for you. I forced a weak smile, carefully avoiding his intense eyes. I know you're worried about me, Michael, but I truly need more time. This is the very last piece of David I have left. I want to hold on to it a little longer. Michael shrugged dismissively, but I could clearly see the annoyance and frustration in the way he clenched his fists tightly. Suit yourself, he said in a noticeably cold voice. But don't take too long to decide. Not everyone is patient enough to wait forever. He turned to leave, but not before casting another long, suspicious glance toward the concealing tarp, then walked out to his expensive truck. The engine roared loudly to life, and the vehicle disappeared quickly in a thick cloud of dust. I sank back into the chair with a heavy sigh of relief, though my heart was still pounding anxiously. Michael hadn't just come to convince me to sell. He was genuinely suspicious of something. I could feel it instinctively in my bones. The way he had looked at that tarp, the way he spoke, it was as if he somehow knew I was hiding something extremely important. I looked at the bronze key resting innocently on the table. It felt like it was looking directly back at me, silently challenging me to discover the dangerous secret David had deliberately left behind for me to find. That night, after eating a simple dinner alone at my house, I returned to the Star gas station when everything outside was pitch black. Chicago was unusually quiet. All I could hear were the chirping of crickets and the wind rustling persistently through the dry grass. I stood before the station door, flashlight gripped firmly in hand, wearing David's old work gloves like they were some kind of lucky charm or protective talisman. My heart was pounding relentlessly, not merely from fear, but from the strange, overwhelming feeling that I was about to touch a part of David's life I had never known existed. I took a deep, steadying breath and pushed open the rusty iron gate. Its loud creak sounded almost like a warning, but I refused to stop now. I had come far too far to turn back. I pulled back the concealing tarp covering the cellar door. The flashlight beam illuminated the round lock on the iron plate once again. The bronze key felt ice cold in my trembling hand, and as I inserted it carefully, that same distinctive click sounded again, like an invitation to enter a forbidden world. I opened the heavy cover, and the old wooden staircase appeared before me, dark and deeply mysterious. A powerful, musty smell rose up from below, making me hesitate for just a second, but then I began descending step by careful step, being extremely cautious not to slip and fall. Each step creaked loudly under my feet, as if telling forgotten stories from long ago. The flashlight beam gradually revealed a small basement with stained concrete walls completely covered in thick dust and elaborate cobwebs. In the center of the space stood an old wooden desk, a crooked filing shelf leaning precariously, and a large, imposing safe that stood like a silent guardian protecting precious secrets. I approached the desk slowly, the flashlight trembling noticeably in my unsteady hands. On the table lay a worn leather notebook, its surface covered in layers of dust. I opened it carefully and saw yellowed pages filled with strange numbers and mysterious symbols written in faded black ink that was barely legible. I didn't understand any of it. These were clearly David's private notes, but they made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. I flipped through the fragile pages one by one, desperately looking for a clue, some kind of explanation, but I only found increasing confusion. David, my beloved David, the man I had shared more than 30 years of my life with, who had always told me everything about his day, his thoughts, his dreams. He had kept such a huge, monumental secret hidden from me. I opened the desk drawer with trembling hands. My heart nearly stopped beating when I saw the sealed envelopes arranged neatly inside. I opened one with shaking fingers, and my heart genuinely stopped when I saw an official identification card with David's familiar photograph on it, but with a completely different name printed clearly below. Carlos Mendoza. I opened another envelope with growing dread. This time it contained a passport, also featuring David's photograph, but with yet another different name, Eduardo Ramirez. Trembling uncontrollably, I laid them all out on the dusty table, my head spinning violently. Why did David need these false documents? Who was he really? The man I loved so deeply, Sarah's devoted father, the one who held me tenderly every night and spoke of simple, honest dreams. Had he been living another completely separate life that I never knew anything about? I sank into the old chair, my hands pressed against my head, desperately trying to stop the overwhelming flood of confused thoughts, but I couldn't manage it. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I forced myself to stand up and walk toward the large, intimidating safe position in the corner of the basement. The bronze key once again fit perfectly into its lock. I turned it carefully. The metallic click sounded unnaturally loud in the confined space, and the heavy safe door slowly swung open with a prolonged creak. Inside were enormous stacks of dollar bills, neatly tied with rubber bands, amounts that at a single glance clearly totaled millions of dollars. I had never seen so much money in my entire life. In addition, there were thick folders of official documents stamped prominently with the word "secret" in red ink and a small wooden box containing several USB drives that looked modern and out of place among the aged surroundings. I took one of the small drives in my hands. Small but surprisingly heavy, as if it held an entire hidden world of information I wasn't remotely ready to discover. At that exact moment, the distinct sound of footsteps came clearly from outside the gas station. I jumped violently, almost dropping the USB drive. The footsteps were clear and heavy on the gravel outside. I immediately switched off the flashlight, plunging myself into complete darkness. My heart was pounding so loudly in my chest, I thought it might explode. I ran up the ladder stairs as quietly as possible, closing the cellar hatch carefully, being extremely cautious not to make even the slightest sound. Through a narrow crack in the dirty window, I saw a car's bright headlights illuminate the entire area with a blinding glare that forced me to squint my eyes. Two unknown men, both dressed in dark black jackets, stood right in front of the gas station, talking in hushed, low voices that I couldn't quite make out. One held a cell phone and shone a powerful flashlight beam directly on the office area. The beam of light passed directly over the cash register where I had been sitting just minutes before. I pressed myself flat against the cold wall, barely daring to breathe, fearing desperately that any noise at all could give away my presence. "Nobody's here right now," one said in a harsh, gravelly voice. "Are you absolutely sure it's here?" the other replied coldly. "Positive. She was here working all day today. If there's something hidden, it absolutely has to be here somewhere." I didn't know exactly what they were talking about, but one thing was crystal clear to me. They were searching for the exact same thing I had just discovered. That basement, those mysterious documents, the massive amount of money, the USB drives. These were what someone was desperate enough to get their hands on to send men in the middle of the night. I waited silently, my back completely soaked with nervous sweat, until the threatening roar of their motorcycle engine faded gradually into the darkness. I finally sank to the floor, gasping for air, still clutching the bronze key tightly in my hand. It was then that I truly understood the gravity of my situation. The Star gas station wasn't simply David's inheritance to me. It was a dangerous center of a huge secret, a secret that many ruthless people would do absolutely anything to possess. I looked toward the concealed hatch, feeling an intense mix of fear and rising anger. David had hidden all of this from me throughout all those years, but he had also deliberately left me this burden, a responsibility I genuinely didn't know if I was strong enough to bear alone. The next morning, I opened the Star gas station as usual, but the peace I once felt there was completely gone. As I bent down to pick up a piece of paper the wind had blown under the door, I discovered a white envelope trapped underneath it. My hand froze mid-motion, a terrible feeling running through my entire body. I picked up the envelope slowly. It felt light and innocent, but when I opened it with trembling fingers, the single sheet of paper inside made my heart almost stop beating entirely. Just one sentence, written in sharp, angry strokes that looked violent. "You better not touch what your husband left behind." No signature, no identifying name, just a warning as cold and threatening as the sharp edge of a knife pressed against skin. I tucked the threatening note into my jacket pocket, trying my best to appear calm and composed. But in my head, questions were swirling chaotically and uncontrollably. Who had left it here? What did they know about the hidden basement? About the documents, the money, and most importantly, how much did they truly know about David's secret life? I looked around the empty gas station nervously and clutched the cross hanging from my neck, whispering a desperate prayer under my breath, although the fear still clung to me tightly like the oppressive darkness outside. Around noon, as I sat in the old wooden chair trying to sort out my racing thoughts, the sound of an engine broke the tense silence once again. I instantly recognized Michael's shiny, expensive truck approaching. He stepped out, looking impeccable in his tailored suit, but this time he wasn't alone. Two unknown men, tall and burly, both dressed in dark shirts, followed him closely. One had a long, prominent scar running down his cheek and a gaze as sharp and dangerous as a razor blade. The other walked slowly and rhythmically, tapping his belt with his fingers repeatedly, as if he were carefully sizing everything up. Michael smiled with his usual practiced expression, but I could see the underlying tension in it clearly. "Mom, I brought some business partners to see this land," he said, his voice superficially soft but loaded with unmistakable pressure. "They're very interested in purchasing the gas station. What do you think?" I stood up firmly, forcing my voice to sound harsh and determined. "I already told you clearly, Michael. I'm not planning to sell right now." The man with the prominent scar twisted his lips into a half-smile that looked more like a sneer, and his penetrating gaze swept across the entire office, stopping directly at the corner where I had hidden the cellar door. He tapped his fingers on the table, tap, 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 with a steady, unnerving rhythm, as if trying to gauge my reaction carefully. "You'd better think it over very carefully," he muttered, his voice deep and cold. "Good opportunities like this don't come around twice." Michael cut in quickly with a dry smile. "Mom, I just want what's best for you. This gas station is completely worthless now. Sell it, and you'll have plenty of money to live comfortably for the rest of your life." I looked him straight in the eye, remaining silent. I knew this wasn't just about buying a gas station anymore. He wanted something much bigger, what I was hiding in that basement. In the end, Michael gave a brief signal, and the two intimidating men left. Before getting into his truck, he turned back to me, lowering his voice to barely above a whisper. "Don't make me repeat myself again. I really don't want things to get complicated." His words, though spoken softly, were an unmistakable threat. When the truck finally disappeared in the distance, I stood there alone, my hand gripping the edge of the table tightly, fighting the anger and fear boiling inside me. Michael was no longer just my son-in-law. He was actively becoming a genuine danger, and I knew instinctively those men weren't ordinary business partners. I had barely managed to calm myself down when I heard hurried footsteps approaching from outside. It was Mrs. Davis, my concerned neighbor from across the street, who rushed in with a worried expression etched on her face. "Emily, I saw some very strange men out there last night," she said with a trembling voice. "They were smoking and staring at the gas station for well over an hour. I seriously thought about calling the police, but they left before I could make the call." I took her hand gently, smiling weakly to reassure her, though inside I felt like my entire world was falling apart. Were they the ones who left a threatening note, or were they Michael's men? I thanked Mrs. Davis sincerely and promised to be extremely careful. But as soon as she left, I collapsed into the chair, my head spinning completely out of control. That night, as I had just locked the gas station door securely and was preparing to drive home, a black car suddenly stopped on the other side of the street. The headlights shone directly in my face, so intensely bright I had to squint my eyes painfully. The car window rolled down slowly, and before I could get a good look at who was inside, an empty beer bottle came flying out violently, rolling noisily on the gravel, accompanied by wild, mocking laughter that echoed eerily in the air. "Stay out of what doesn't concern you, old woman," a harsh voice shouted aggressively, and the car sped off rapidly, leaving me standing there alone, my hand clutching my keychain so tightly it hurt. I looked at the shattered bottle on the road, the sharp fragments glistening ominously under the pale moonlight, and I felt as if someone had just stabbed me directly in the chest. I got into my car with shaking hands, but they were trembling so violently I couldn't even get the key into the ignition. I just sat there in the darkness, listening to the frantic, terrified beating of my heart. The warning on the paper, the threatening look of the man with the scar, the wild laughter from the black car, it all felt like ropes tightening around me, constricting my ability to breathe. I thought of David, of all the years we spent together, of those peaceful nights when he held me close and talked about simple, honest dreams. Could he have possibly known that one day I would be pushed to such a dangerous edge? Had he left that basement intentionally for me to face the shadows he himself had hidden? Everything remained tense until one Monday afternoon. I was sitting in my kitchen, a cup of cold coffee in my hand, when the phone rang suddenly. Sarah's voice came through, filled with panic and trembling so violently that I almost dropped the cup. "Mom, Lily was almost taken by a stranger at the school gate. The teacher said I sent someone to pick her up, but I obviously didn't send anyone." I felt my heart stop completely. I didn't have time to ask questions. I just managed to say, "I'm on my way right now," and ran to the car, my mind racing with terrifying possibilities. Lily, my precious little granddaughter. Would someone actually be willing to harm an innocent child? The thought pierced me like a knife, and I slammed hard on the accelerator, not caring about the dusty road to school. When I arrived, Sarah was standing at the school entrance, hugging Lily tightly to her chest. The little girl clung desperately to her mother, her face still pale, her small hands trembling as she clutched Sarah's clothes. I ran to them immediately, knelt down, and hugged Lily tightly, feeling the warmth of her small body in my arms. "It's your grandma, sweetheart. Are you okay, my love?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice calm so as not to scare her more.